Welcome to Storytime with Tallulah. Today's readings come from r/ProRevenge. The first one is titled, Mike Finds a Way to Get Rid of Problem Employee. The revenge wasn't mine, but I figured I'd share as I was witness to the beginning. Certain names and details changed to protect the guilty. Background. Years back, I worked for a large bank in the UK. We all worked on the same floor and in the same department, but within different teams. I was just passing through on a second and saw the beginning of this revenge, but was filled in on the aftermath later. One of the teams was run by a woman called Sarah. Sarah was by many measures a good manager, but she had a blind spot. That blind spot was a woman called Helen. Now, when I was in my previous role, I interacted with Helen a fair bit, and she had seemed friendly, but when it came to actually working with her, she was a nightmare. She'd tattle, steal ideas and credit, and generally throw you under the bus at any opportunity. I'm not sure why Sarah always protected her, but it soon became a sore point for most people on the floor who had to deal with her. Enter Mike, who was the manager of a smaller team. Mike could be a bit of a wiener, but was still professional and fun to work with. To give you an idea of his character, I found out I was being made redundant, and even though he wasn't my manager, he heard about it and booked time out to help me with my CV and do interview practice. Shortly after, it was announced that Mike's smaller team was being dissolved and the staff either made redundant or moved to other teams. At the time of the cuts, the economy in the UK was in a bad state and all the banks were looking for efficiencies. He was redeployed and took the vacant manager role under Sarah that Helen had been gunning for. To make matters worse, Helen now reported directly to him. Helen was furious and spent no time in making her discontent known, as she felt she was entitled to the promotion. Unfortunately for her, Mike was wise to her. They'd both joined the company around the same time, and so he knew exactly what she was like. He'd even had her blame him for her mistakes before. Pooh! Even the projects she'd gotten so much praise for had been work one of his staff had done. So he started the process of documenting her poor work and attitude to manage her out of the business. Sarah, however, would not allow it. Helen was a high performer in her eyes, and she wouldn't sign off on him getting rid of her. When I left the team, Mike was frustrated with her and wasn't sure what to do. The revenge. I met up with Mike a year later, and he had shared how he had solved the Helen problem with me because he knew all of the issues I had had with her. Because Sarah had his hands tied, his only other option to get Helen out of the team was for her to leave on her own accord. He couldn't oust her by making her life difficult, or she'd go to Sarah, so he went the other way. That mother effer sat through every performance meeting with her for the rest of the year, gritting his teeth and praising her. That then justified him giving her a really high performance rating. He also used his own contacts to find roles in other teams at his grade that he then talked up to Helen. These roles were specifically selected because they specialized in one of the things Helen claimed she was an expert at, but had very little experience in. Basically roles where he knew she'd have the highest chance of pooing the bed. Eventually, she applied for one, and he spent several weeks coaching her for the interview. In the company at that time, the interviews were scored off of three main factors: performance rating and current role, competency-based interview skills, relevant experience. He'd done everything he could to make her shine in all three. She took the promotion within 2 months, had quit the bank. He knew she wasn't ready for the responsibility, didn't have the skills, and her poor work ethic would be exposed. Worst case, she'd get her poo together, and he'd still look like the perfect manager to Sarah. Too long, didn't read. Upon finding out he couldn't fire the problem employee, manager gets her promoted to a team where she'll either get fired or quit. Our next story also comes from r/ProRevenge, titled, Don't Want to Do Your Chores, Son? Well, have fun being stuck at home. Paragraph, too long, didn't read, at the bottom. I hope this is appropriate here. So this story deserves some context. It's actually pro-revenge that my father did to me. Backstory. After I'd graduated from high school and still hadn't found my calling, my parents told me I could live with them rent-free as long as I did one very important thing. Helped out with the chores, don't bring any girls or friends home after 9 p.m., and occasionally offer to help with the groceries for the week. The lead-up. It had been about 3 months, and for the most part, I was adhering to the second and third rule I was given. That all changed when I met my first adult lady friend. We'll call her Roxy, because she was a pretty bad chick. Now, Roxy was a super bad influence on me. She started getting me to stay out late, spend most of my paychecks on getting us booze, and ganja and such. My dad from time to time would remind me, you need to make sure you're helping with the chores and mind throwing $50 towards groceries this week? Kind of reminders. That all changed after 3 months of being out of school and about a month and a half total of me knowing Roxy. We had come home from a concert in another city. For anyone who's my almost old fart age, it was a concert for Papa Roach. And she told me she was too tired to go home and she wanted to crash with me at my parents' home. The time, 2:30 a.m. We pulled up to the driveway and I told her to be quiet. Of course she wasn't, cause it was Roxy. Soon as we step inside the house and I've just locked the door, she starts screaming the chorus line from Twisted Sister's "We're Not Gonna Take It" at the top of her lungs. Like clockwork, my parents' light comes on and my dad comes out of his room like an effing cheetah. A cheetah, I tell you! He sees us both and looks back in his room. Turning his head around, he goes, "Take her home now." I immediately turn around and take Roxy home. She's all mad and tells me I should stand up to my old man, yada yada yada. Soon as we get her home, I know I can't go home, so I stay at her apartment with her. The next morning, there's a text on my phone. "Come home at your earliest convenience. Love, Dad." I know I'm dead because A, my dad never texts me, and B, if he does text me, he's more of a John Madden play-by-play kind of guy. What I mean is he's going to give you a paragraph of words for what could have been a single sentence or two. I kiss Roxy goodbye for what I'm sure is the last time I'll see another human being and head home. When I get home, he's sitting at the table with a pen and a piece of paper in front of him. He tells me to sit down and then puts the piece of paper in front of me. The paper is an actual itemized list. He tells me that for the last month and a half I haven't done any of my chores and that he's calculated based on the roughly 4 to 5 hours a week of time I wasted for him that amounts to his pay, which was $25 an hour. He's an RN, aka registered nurse. So he's taken 4 hours by 6 weekends times 25 per hour and figured that I need to pay him $600 for time wasted. Then he's also, for good measure, thrown in an extra $100 for 2 times he asked me for $50 to help out towards groceries. He gets up and walks over and says there is a dotted line for me to sign stating I will pay all of this back in 1 month's time. I'm adding it all up in my head and tell him I barely have $1,000 after taxes a month. He says I should have thought about that before I brought a girl home at 2:30 in the morning. He tells me if I don't sign the paperwork, I have 30 minutes to get my crap and get the F out. I legit almost start bawling and tell him that I want to sign the paper, but could I at least have a month extension? He puts his hand to his chin and then looks down at me and agrees. He says, "You have 2 months to pay me $600. Oh, and by the way," he purposely hangs this in air for a good 20 seconds. "If you don't pay and you continue to break my 3 simple rules, there will be pain in your future." He revises the contract he's wrote up on the paper and I sign it. So a month and a half goes by and I've managed to pay him $450. I haven't seen Roxy as much over the 2 months because for obvious reasons, her cash pit has dried up a bit. She then calls me on day 45 and tells me that she misses me. She wishes we would hang out. Why am I working so much overtime? I've told her that I have to pay my dad back or get kicked out. Of course, she ends up ending the call shortly after that, and then it happens. She texts me the next day about a show in another city. I hear all the usual, "Oh, it's a band I really like. I've been wanting to see them forever. Plus, I miss snuggling up to you at the concert." I somehow stupidly agree to go with her. Well, while we're up there, my wallet gets stolen out of my front pocket. To this day, I think Roxy did it, even though I've never been able to prove it. We go home, I drop Roxy off, and a few days go by. My dad comes knocking on my door, as it's now officially day 55. He asks me, do I want to pay him the last $150 or wait till the 2 months are officially up? I tell him I got him and that I'll go to the bank right now, seeing as I just got paid the day before. I look around my room for my wallet, nowhere to be found. I find the jeans I wore at the concert I was at with Roxy, no wallet in there either. It's worth noting I had and still have a terrible habit of leaving my wallet in my jeans after I take them off and forgetting that for several days. I started panicking as I cannot find my wallet anywhere. I check everywhere, the house, the backyard, my car. I even called the last place I was at work and see if they might have it. No one's seen my wallet. I go back to my dad, who's in the backyard cutting the grass, and tell him what's going on. He gives me a half grin and says, "Sorry for your situation, but I'm treating you like a tenant now. Go to the bank, get my money, and when you come back and pay me the $150, we'll go from there." I haul butt to the bank and my heart about falls out of my chest as the teller tells me my account has a balance of $3.42. My heart drops to the ground. Worth noting, it was a local bank that I've banked at since I was around 13. I was 18 at the time, so they all knew me at the bank and with some quick verification gave me info on my account. I head back home and tell my dad what happened. He puts his hand on my shoulder and says, that sucks. Well, I'm going to have to get my $150 still, right? I tell him there's no way to have the money to him in 5 days or less. He says, okay, well, how about I drive you to work seeing as you don't have a driver's license right now? He drives me to work, to which I'm there for roughly 8 hours. The revenge, while at work, my dad pulled out his massive collection of craftsman tools and proceeds to drain all the fluids in my car. He gets a buddy to come over and help completely remove my motor, my transmission, and my tires. My dad and his buddy, being ASE master mechanic, managed to do all of this in an 8-hour shift of me being at work. At the end of my 8-hour shift, my dad is in the parking lot waiting for me. He's in his work coveralls, which I find funny, and he's got grease all over his arms. He drives me home and I notice my car is pulled into the garage and on jack stands. I look at my dad and ask, "What's up with my car?" He points to the garage. "Oh, go ahead and see. I've got my $150 today." I jump out of the car as it goes into park and run over to my car. There's a note on the front of it from my dad's mechanic friend stating the motor, transmission, and tires have all been sold to him for $150 and that he'll happily not only give me back the items, but that he'll help me install them back into my car, but that I have to work for him on my 2 days off for the next 4 weeks from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. I fall over crying, obviously, and after my dad laughs a bit, tells me my first shift starts tomorrow. It is further worth noting that my dad actually owned this vehicle, and it was titled, tagged, and licensed in his name, so technically he could do whatever he wants with it. He had just chosen to allow me to use the vehicle as mine. I would spend the next 4 weeks working with my dad's mechanic friend on my days off. After 2 days of working, we'd bring a few pieces of my car back to the house and he'd teach me how to put these items back together. And slowly but surely, I learned out to be my very own mini do-it-yourself garage mechanic. This may not fit here, and my dad did pro-revenge me because shortly after I lost my car, Roxy dumped me, and of all things, my dad took 6 months out of my life to teach me how to be a somewhat responsible adult. Oh, and the icing on the cake soon, as we had my car back together and running, my dad walked up to me and gave me an envelope with $450 in it and a note that said, "Stop being a knucklehead." Too long, didn't read. Lived at home with my parents after high school. Wouldn't help do chores, brought a girl over past their don't bring a girl home time, and wouldn't help for groceries. Dad gave me a contract to pay X amount for his time wasted. Broke the contract, so he and a mechanic buddy stripped my car to the frame almost, made me work with the mechanic friend of his to earn back all the parts and help put them back on my vehicle. Ended up teaching me how to work on cars and then gave back my money in the end. Edit, for some clarity. Edit to my edit. Thank you so much for coins, the love and words of awesomeness. My dad could be tough at times, but he's always been fair. Nothing, and I repeat, nothing he ever did was unwarranted. I was for a time living rent-free as an adult, and all he asked was for me to clean the bathrooms, vacuum the rooms with carpets, not bring girls and friends home all hours of the night, and help with groceries every once in a while. As an adult, I honestly deserved way worse than what I got. Heck, the adult 37-year-old me would have kicked my 18-year-old self in the butt and said, "GTFO out of my house, you ungrateful little turd." Wow, that's that's kind of crazy. I don't know. How do you feel about that? It's kind of funny. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed that. If you liked the video, please like it. If you have not subscribed yet, please subscribe and hit that bell for notifications so you know when more videos come out. Thank you all for your continued support, and if you have not joined the Discord yet, there's a link for that in the description as well. I would love to see you over there. And with that being said, we will see you next time.